In the hit movie Toy Story, we're introduced to the terrifying concept that all toys are secretly alive, watching you as you sleep, change, and that thing you're thinking of right now. Yeah, the implications aren't great. Luckily, the movies focus on the much more marketable concept that while you're not watching, your toys are out having fun, whimsical adventures. Well, the same thing is happening when you leave your money at the bank, except for instead of making new friends or committing Grand Theft Pizza Truck, the bank is secretly sending your money to go work for the fossil fuel industry. Your hard-earned dollars are out there right now constructing a pipeline, or injecting fracking chemicals into the ground, or even paying for the bulldozers facing off against indigenous protesters, forming a human shield to stop their ancestral land from being destroyed. Well, not that last one, obviously. That's just a cartoon example. That wouldn't really.
Environmental and tribal groups are trying to stop construction of the Enbridge pipeline in northern Minnesota.
Oh, awesome. Well, you might be thinking, well, not my money. I mean, I just checked my account this morning and it's right where I left it. Yeah, your bank will say your money is safe and sound, but in reality, they can take up to 90% of your money and hand it out to whoever so they can earn interest on it. It's called fractional reserve banking, and it's impossibly boring, but basically, it allows banks to keep just a tiny fraction of your cash on hand. And in 2021 alone, this darling little policy allowed major banks to loan $742 billion to the fossil fuel industry. The even more f***ed up part is that banks know what they're doing is shady as hell, as evidenced by the literal hundreds of sustainability campaigns they're constantly bragging about. But instead of just not giving your money to the fossil fuel industry, they're continuing their oil and gas lending and then papering over the whole thing with a bunch of weak, feel-good pledges that they'll never be held accountable for. And not to put too fine a point on it, but yes, I am talking about your money in your bank right now. That money that you kissed on the forehead and tucked in ever so sweetly at your bank is out on the town right now funding the exact climate disaster that we're trying to avoid. To put it another way, there's a snake in our boots. Luckily, if there's one thing banks love more than funding oil and gas, it's avoiding bad PR. And since PR is basically a fancy way of saying reputation, that's something that we actually get to decide. Hi, I'm Rollie Williams, a guy with a climate science and policy master's degree and exactly 3 pairs of pants. These are my favorites, and I hate to break it to you, but your money is cheating on you with the fossil fuel industry. Welcome to Climate Town. Okay, I'm a guy with $50,000 in student loan debt. I don't tend to have a whole lot of cash on hand. But I do have a bank account because they're convenient, relatively safe, and I got sick of holding all my money every time I went swimming. Whoa, pretty cool, huh? But banks are businesses. They're not just gonna store all your stuff for free. That would make them your mom's basement. And by the way, she was wondering if you could maybe come by and help her go through some stuff. She's trying to clear some boxes out of there. Maybe even get lunch. She'd love to know what you're up to. Call your mom. It's no secret that banks give out loans. That's kind of their whole shtick.
The money that comes into a bank must be put to work to earn a profit for the bank. And so, the bank invests much of its money.
They take the money that people leave with them and they give it to other people and businesses who need money for things like buying a house, or building a putt-putt golf course, or buying a shovel to bury a body where no one will think to look. These loans get paid back over time with interest, and now the bank has your money and some bonus money, also known as profit. But banks get to choose who they give loans to. It's the reason why my religious pizza restaurant, Jesus Crust, never got a loan, and it's the reason why banks have been able to completely f*** us on climate change without us hearing much about it. In the 6 years since the Paris Agreement, my God, it's been 6 years. What are we doing? In the time since the Paris Climate Agreement, big banks have made it very clear that they understand the importance of stopping climate change. Now, they may have been a little playfully skeptical about climate change in the past, but that was then, and this is now. And now they're all very committed to being part of the solution. They're so committed to stopping climate change, in fact, that more than 100 huge banks that collectively represent almost 40% of global banking assets have joined the UN's Net Zero Banking Alliance. Oh, amazing. That's your JP Morgan Chases, your Citibanks, your Bank of Americas, your Wells Fargo. They have all pledged, hand to God, that they have seen the light and they are going net zero by 2050. So awesome! And that's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching Climate. You know what? this is me being skeptical, but banks are legally required to disclose their financial records. Let's just take a quick peek at their balance sheets just to make sure our money is actually out having nostalgic and emotionally charged adventures with other money and not being used to, destroy the life support systems that we depend on for things like food and shelter. And I'm sure it's fine, but let's just check. Fossil fuel financing from the world's 60 largest banks has reached $4.6 trillion in the 6 years since the adoption of the Paris Agreement. Well, that's not what they said. Well, you know what? Maybe it's just a fluke. Let's try another one. 60 banks profiled in this report funneled $185.5 billion just last year into the 100 companies doing the most to expand the fossil fuel sector, such as Saudi Aramco and ExxonMobil. Okay, that's not good. But banking is international, okay? A lot of foreign banks doing bad stuff. At least US banks aren't lying to their customers, okay? Here's one. 4 US banks. Okay, looking good. 4 US banks, nothing to freak out about there. Okay, 4 US banks. JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America together account for 1/4 of all fossil fuel financing identified over the last 6 years. Isn't what? Okay, all right. You know what? Let's give the undisputed king of fossil fuel financing, JP Morgan Chase, a chance to explain itself. Here is their pledge to go net zero by 2050, and in 2021 alone, they funneled $61.7 billion to oil and gas companies. Well, sheesh, Daniels, that's enough money to remake the entire Toy Story franchise more than 181 times, which is not strictly relevant, but I haven't said a Toy Story thing in a while, and I'm trying to work it in a little bit more. Now, call me crazy, but I do want to give JP Morgan Chase a shot at explaining themselves. I mean, it certainly doesn't seem to me like they're being sustainable, but I'm not a finance guy. Maybe their strategy is just too mathy and complicated for me. Maybe I haven't spent enough time marinating my brain in cocaine at Wharton Business School to really get the strategy. And I'm probably gonna be in over my head, but let's just take a look at JP Morgan Chase's official Carbon Compass report released in May of 2021, where they explain how they're actually totally taking climate change into account, and what's more, they're even aligned with the climate goals set out in the Paris Agreement. And just for the record, as far as titles go, Carbon Compass, fantastic title. Leaves a lot of room for ambiguity while still sounding vaguely sustainable. Perfect, no notes. And they're backing all their claims with hard motherfucking science. And not just any science, the science all the way from the International Energy Agency, or IEA, or IYA if you're a karate guy. And as hilarious as that hilarious karate guy joke was, the IEA is no joke. They're a 47-year-old international energy watchdog agency, making them 329 in watchdog years. They also happen to be the world's foremost authority on global energy systems and the authors of the World Energy Model, which has been described as probably the most influential energy model in the policy domain. And if JP Morgan Chase has the IEA on their side, well, I might be out of my element here, people. So that's the end of the episode. I guess banks are sustainable after all. I don't know what I was thinking. Thank you so much for watching Climate Town. Okay, there's a whole lot more video left in this video. Okay, we're doing another fake ending psych out thing. Kind of feel like we went to that well already. Well, as long as I'm narrating the subtext. Someone's poisoned the water hole. No, cut that. Okay, I guess we could do just the most basic of Google searches just to make sure that JP Morgan Chase isn't, cherry picking a few IEA stats to justify their horrendous loaning practices. Okay, here's the IEA's net zero by 2050 roadmap. It's a blistering 224 pages, just crammed full of hard science, specific objectives, and immediate steps required to comply with climate goals, all while ensuring stable and affordable energy supplies, providing universal energy access, and enabling robust economic growth. Awesome. According to the IEA, there's a small but feasible chance we could stay under 1.5 degrees, but only if pretty much everyone in the world gets on the same page right away and commits to a massive and sustained investment in climate solutions. And when it comes to the kind of fossil fuel expansion projects big banks are currently engaged in, none. Not any. The IEA describes a narrow window for success, and that success is entirely dependent on there being no new fossil fuel expansion. Not some new investment in fossil fuels, and certainly not an increased amount of investment in fossil fuels. No question. And since the 2021 IEA roadmap was published, not one of the major US banks has actually announced a plan to stop financing fossil fuel expansion. There is one bank that's actually got a no fossil fuel plan, and that is La Banque Postale. And that's in France, if you couldn't tell from my perfect French accent. Oh, no, oui, I'm so hurt by these banks. They're expanding fossil fuels, even though they say they're not. Sacre basketball. Oh, what an horrible day it is to be a bank that got a little British, whatever, because JP Morgan Chase actually increased its fossil fuel financing in 2021, sending $16 billion to companies expanding fossil fuels. And not to belabor the point here, JP Morgan Chase and Company, but this is your source that you chose. The IEA is telling you that if we're even going to have a slim chance at avoiding catastrophic climate change, we need to stop investing in new fossil fuel projects immediately and without exception. Wesley Snipes! But maybe the IEA just misunderstood the science. I'm just kidding. The answer is obvious. These banks only care about the science when it's convenient because they want to keep making money from lending to fossil fuel companies while maintaining a good reputation. I mean, and it's not even a new tactic. We've seen this exact same move hundreds of times before. It's kind of the perfect lie. So you say you're going net zero by 2050, and then you continue financing the absolute piss out of the fossil fuel industry because 2050 happens to be, and I think I have this right, 28 years from now. And you give yourself a deadline way, way, way off so that it's not even technically a lie until 2050 rolls around, at which point the executives who made the pledge will have retired and a brand new crop of Wharton Business School cocaine aficionados will have rolled in, blame the old executives for lying, and then make a new pledge for like net zero by 2080 or something. Woody Harrelson! A 2050 net zero pledge is about as meaningful as me pledging to become a professional basketball player by 2050. I got plenty of time. It's just cheaper for banks to lie about being sustainable and then pay a fine if they get caught. Kind of like that time Wells Fargo got caught opening up fraudulent accounts for their customers back in 2016. They apologized, paid a fine, promised to be better, made a net zero pledge, and then in 2021 alone, they provided $46.2 billion to the fossil fuel industry. Oh, sick! So if lying and then giving a half-assed apology if you get caught has been a winning strategy for banks, what possible recourse do we have to get banks to stop propping up the expansion of the fossil fuel industry? It's starting to feel like there are no good options left. Maybe you're someone who likes to vote with your money. So say last week you saved 20 bucks by riding your bike instead of paying for gas. Well, it turns out that 20 bucks you left in your bank account just snuck out the back window and into the open arms of the fossil fuel industry anyway. And this is virtually every major bank we're talking about, not just a handful of miserly Scrooges who are trying to destroy the earth to spite their ex-wives. This is your money that you own being used against your will for stuff you do not want. And it's not just pipelines. It's also financing for a coal terminal in Bangladesh. It's also providing fossil fuel companies the money to pay politicians to prevent climate policy. It's also money for drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It sucks, and it's happening. And it sucks that it's happening. But we're now officially at the what we're gonna do about it phase of the video. So step one is switch your bank. There's actually a handful of full-service, FDIC-insured banking options out there whose whole shtick is that they don't lend money to the oil and gas industry. It's kind of a sorry state of affairs when the two kinds of banks are regular banks and banks that aren't secretly funding ecological collapse, but them's the banks. Local credit unions and small regional banks are a good place to start looking because they're more transparent about how they lend out money, and financing often goes towards projects that help the local community. But whichever bank you switch to, watch out for greenwashing, also known as lying. It's everywhere. Places like, Bank of the West will really lay it on thick about having the strongest environmental policies of any major US bank, which is an incredibly low bar that they still trip over. Because if you get to the first page of the fine print, you'll find that they only don't lend to a very small handful of fossil fuel projects, which means they're giving their customers money to the oil and gas industry. And on top of that, they're 100% owned by BNP Paribas, which is the 10th largest fossil fuel funding bank in the world. Now, I'm not saying that all financing is bad or evil. Financing is actually a critical piece of the green energy transition. In fact, the Earth Day 2022 theme is Invest in Our Planet, which means not just avoiding harmful financing, but finding good things to do with it too. But while it is important that your money go to a place that aligns with your personal values, individual actions on their own are not gonna do much. Yeah, it's a bummer, but banks have access to unimaginably fat stacks of cash. They can find the money to finance their fossil fuel funding habits. They just prefer to get it from their customers because we give it to them basically for free. What we've got to do is turn the act of lending to fossil fuel companies into a PR nightmare. And not the kind of nightmare where it's like, oh, my teeth are falling out. We're talking about the, oh, my toys are alive and they want to murder me kind of nightmare.
We toys can see everything.
Do you remember those 4 biggest American banks from the intro who together are responsible for 1/4 of all fossil fuel financing since the Paris Accords? Well, they're all about to hold their annual shareholder meeting. That's when the company's shareholders, who technically control the company, get together to decide whether they like the way their company is being managed. Banks have been able to avoid fossil fuel financing accountability for years, but the tireless work of hundreds of climate organizations has created a groundswell of shareholder support, and now every major Wall Street bank is facing a shareholder resolution to stop funding fossil fuel expansion. So if the shareholders start to see their bank getting absolutely blasted on social media about their fossil fuel lending practices and how completely out of step they are with the IEA guidelines or the Paris Accords or net zero pledges, they might just decide that now is the time to do something about it. So if you got yourself a Twitter account or a little Instagram or a TikTok or even a Meta Presents Facebook.com profile, let's get to blasting about it. Get weird with it if you want, but I think a pretty effective message would be something along the lines of, hey guy, notice you're lending billions of your customers' dollars to the fossil fuel industry. We don't like that, and if you don't stop right away, we're taking our money and we're going home. Something like that. And because this video is very much built on the shoulders of a bunch of delightful groups leading the charge, link in the bio, feel free to fire up some of these hashtags, but definitely follow these groups, or at least talk them up to their crushes at parties. And if none of that sounds appealing to you, maybe just consider researching the relationship between banks and the fossil fuel industry. Keep an eye on who your bank gives money to. Watch their financial disclosures. Watch them as they sleep. Watch them with unblinking eyes. Because now that you have an idea of what they're up to, you can see everything. Okay, that's the end for real, no fake psych out ending. Thank you so much for watching Climate Town. I really appreciate it. If you like what you see and you want to maybe get involved, head on down to the Climate Town Discord server. We set up a whole channel devoted to this issue where you can find and share resources, learn more about shareholder meetings, petitions, resolutions, and maybe even plan some collective actions together. We've even got some juicy intel about some protests that are happening on the big shareholder meeting day. And of course, I gotta give a big shout out to the Rainforest Action Network, the Sierra Club, and the Stop the Money Pipeline campaign, whose support helped make this episode possible. And obviously, the Banking on Climate Chaos report. Check it out. They did some great research in there, and it was super helpful in writing this episode. All right, if you stuck around this long, it's maybe because you're, trapped under like a bale of hay or something, and you can't touch the computer to stop it, or you like the channel. And if you like the channel enough and you want to support us, we have a Patreon page where you can donate like $5 a month, and you get access to content that's like behind the scenes or some cut tape or just stuff that's not good enough to be free right here on YouTube. So if you want to go over to the Patreon page, we got the link in the bio. It's much appreciated, but honestly, thank you so much just for watching. And you might be wondering why I didn't have Sid as the oil companies or anything. Sid is not the bad guy in Toy Story. And I know they're setting him up to be a bad dude. He's got a skull t-shirt, a buzz cut. He's just kind of a real menacing looking character. But what crime is he committing? He owns those toys. He's not like ripping them apart and leaving them ripped apart. He's like doing creative stuff to them. He's like putting a pterodactyl head on a doll's body. That's interesting. Okay, that's not the sign of a sociopath, that's the sign of a future surgeon or a transplant doctor or something. All right, he's not torturing animals. In fact, he treats his dog really well. He gives the dog like fresh meat and stuff, And he and his dog have bonded over their shared love of playing with their toys. Yes, maybe they play a little rough with their toys, but does Sid deserve to have the kind of extremely long-lasting psychological damage of a bunch of toys coming to life right in front of his eyes?
I'm talking to you, Sid Phillips.
Just eroding every piece of what he understood the universe to stand for just because he was being a little mean to inanimate objects that he owns? It's crazy, it's ridiculous, and I won't stand for it. Sid is not the villain of Toy Story. Okay, this has gone on way too long. This has got to be the longest video I've ever put up. And there's a dog barking in the back. Ugh, this is really off the rails. If you're still watching this, turn it off. Turn it off right now. Thank you so much.
I have not tried marijuana.